Is it becoming springy now, or are you still in winter?
Well, we had a big winter storm that actually came through the day before we went to Saskatchewan.
Okay.
And yeah, most of it's melted now, but it was a black, or like not blackout, but whiteout.
Yeah.
You couldn't see out the windows, and the farm where I grew up, where we went back to, there was 20-foot snow drifts.
Picturesque, but I'm not jealous.
No. But anyway, welcome everyone to episode 10 of A Case for Travel Tuesdays. I can't believe that I've been doing this for 10 weeks now. Time has really become a blur in these COVID times. So I'd like to welcome Chris Grosch from Airboat Afrika with me today. Chris, you were made in Germany,
Yes.
schooled in English, and you married into French.
Yes.
And now you live in South Africa.
Yeah.
And when you were 3, you moved to Japan for 4 years.
Yeah. So I did my kindergarten and first schooling in Japan.
Cool. So how many languages do you speak?
Okay, fluently German, English, French, where I'm also certified as a simultaneous interpreter. And I kind of managed to figure out what's going on in Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese, because we have Mozambique right next door, and that's Portuguese. So I managed to function. And then there's a few morsels of this and that, Arabic and Japanese and whatever, but it's not a conversation.
I think too, the more languages that you do learn, you start picking up other languages easier, don't you?
It does get easier. You understand the structure and you manage to slot pieces in the right place. And especially when they're related, you know, like the European languages eventually all come from Greek and Latin. Oh, that's easy.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very, very neat. I wish I knew some more languages, and I do plan on learning some. So that's an inspiration. So traveling and exploring and meeting new people has been a way of life for you. So how have you adapted your travel and your way of life during these times?
Okay, well, traveling's always been there since I was little, you know, moving to different countries and traveling. So the process of it, the technicalities are a normal occurrence to me. What I learned as I grew up and as an adult is to just be more open to speak to people, to ask for help, ask for directions. Where can I find this? How do I do that? And so on, which means you have to learn something like a language. That's the first part. And I always try to stay with people. I try and avoid hotels and things as much as I can. And this way you sleep local, you eat local, and you really immerse yourself in the culture, which is that's traveling. So you're not a tourist or a business traveler, you're actually traveling while you might be doing some business eventually, you know? It's a totally different mindset, really, where I'm going to be somewhere. So I'm not visiting in my mind, I'm actually going to be there. That means you adapt as far as you have to. In some places, there's just no tourist infrastructure. So like in West Africa, I go and look for the biggest mosque. They always have a guest house. They always have clean running water, and they're happy to let you stay. It's fine, you know? So I stay there, and people look at me funny. But, you know, this is one of the best solutions that you can find. And that way you meet a lot of people that otherwise you'd probably never even speak to. Which makes life so much more interesting, you know? And I hear so many things about where I am or where I'm going to that otherwise nobody would have told me.
Exactly, getting that local perspective.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, my husband and I did long-term travel in 2018, and that's what we did is we stayed in apartments or more local to talk to the local people, and then as well you get to go to the grocery stores and buy food in the grocery stores and cook using their food, and also you know, learning what they are. I love going to foreign grocery stores. It's one of my favorite things to do when we travel, and markets and
exactly. And I mean, you see things you don't even know what that is. You will not ever like everything. That's not the point. But you discover new things, and things you think you know. Everybody's familiar with peanuts. But in West Africa, as well as Indonesia, they make peanut sauce, and you can eat anything with it, like meat and seafood and whatever. If it's in West Africa, it tends to be quite spicy too. And then you have it with rice or fufu or whatever. And here you learn something about peanuts that you would have never even thought possible.
Well, when we were in Germany for a month in 2018, and the grocery stores, you don't refrigerate your eggs. And here in Canada, everything is refrigerated. The eggs are refrigerated. And we thought, well, if the eggs that aren't refrigerated don't kill the Germans, they're not going to kill us. So we bought them. But I've learned since then that they're not washed. So there's an enzyme around the egg that protects the egg and keeps it fresh, which is here they're washed, and that protective enzyme is removed, and that's why they have to be refrigerated.
Yeah. And in that context, often enough, nature already has a solution. If we just leave it, actually, it's going to be fine. In many cases, you don't need to make it more complicated. And where you don't have electricity or something, well, you got to deal with it as it comes out of the field or the animal or something like this. And yeah, the locals can eat it. So can you.
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of touches on the question that I was going to ask you next with, nothing teaches us to be courageous and self-reliant like travel. So how has travel taught you these things?
Well, when you go to a place where you've never been before, you probably won't speak the language. All the local customs and everything is really strange to you. You need to keep in mind that you appear just as strange to them. And you dress funny and you talk funny and you walk funny. And so in order to function, which is the minimum for a human, right? You have to constantly venture out of your comfort zone, do things differently, observe what are they doing, how do they do it, how do they go about it, and then copy that. That's how we learn when we're little. And that's how we learn as humans from each other. Then eventually you need to learn how to listen to people that you've never met in your life. Because when they tell you this is how it works and don't try it like that, then that's probably, good counsel. And so you keep learning about how to adapt and function in a totally different environment. And then they might say, well, try this, you might like this, and be careful with this stuff because it's probably going to be totally not your taste or something, And if the villagers say there's a mamba in the bush, don't go look for it. Trust them. Go into the bush. So you have to learn to rely on yourself, your observational skills, your experience, but also draw in things that are around you that may seem senseless because you are not used to this, but actually they make a lot of sense once you start doing it a little bit. Then you see how much easier it is actually for yourself. And it's sort of a weird seesaw kind of thing between experience and being naive and open like a child. And somewhere in between is what works for you. Yeah.
So when we first connected, you had said with every step out, something changes inside. So perspective, context, experience, and connection. Can you expand on this a little bit more?
Yeah, I believe life is all about learning and growth. That's essentially what we have to do overall, other than eating and taking care of our family and things. That's the only thing that really makes sense to me in a larger perspective. And that means you need to go out into the unknown, challenge your boundaries, and eventually get to that realm of beyond is what you don't know, you don't know. The world is so much bigger than anything you could imagine. And this planet Earth and the way people live, it all seems so incredibly different. Yes, on the surface, but down below there are so many similarities that once we get a handle on that first degree and we can see a bit further, there is a lot more. And that then teaches me what we have in common and what we don't, what makes us different. But it is always a process of also inward reflection when you come back to where you come from. like you will go back to your home country, your hometown.
Mhm.
Things seem all of a sudden very different. What used to be so familiar is now outstanding and remarkable because you've seen other things and now you notice things that were not noticeable before. And so it's a constant dialogue between yourself and the world, and also your insights, me from back then to me from today, leaving maybe little post-its to me from tomorrow. You know,
Mhm. And I
multiple
know,
personality.
excuse me. You mentioned, when you do travel and then you go back home and go back to your own country, I know exactly what you're talking about. When we left Canada in 2018, it was close to 6 months that we were gone, and we were in Europe for about 4 of those. And something that we really noticed that was different was how laid back Europeans are compared to Canadians, especially for meals and eating. And it's a slower process. It's a process, which is we came back to Canada and went to a restaurant, and the table next to us turned 3 times and we were still there finishing our coffee. It's like, what is your rush? Slow down. Like, here it's just eat, 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 eat as fast as you can and go. And the process of enjoying the meal and enjoying the company that you're with is lost. Yeah.
Life has a different rhythm in different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
That's really remarkable, and it can hinge around a meal. Germans or Northern European Scandinavians, meal is more of a function usually. For the French, and then as you move south, the Spanish or the Italians or the Greeks, a meal is a whole event. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
And, the more, the merrier, and so on. And these differences are also to a degree in Africa. There is a marked difference between what used to be English colonies and French colonies. The way of eating and the whole idea of a meal is completely different and treated differently. And living in South Africa, which is an English-speaking country, we drive on the left. There are certain things I'll never get used to, like the rhythm in the day. You're supposed to have a sandwich and continue working at your desk. And then you finish work at 5 and you go to the pub, and by 7, everybody's like almost drunk. I can't deal with this, I like places where you don't even think about going to dinner until 11 in the evening. That makes
Oh,
sense to
wow.
me, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just very, very different. And
Mm-hmm.
well, the whole rhythm in the day changes to wherever you go. So it's, I guess, in the end, all about what you prefer,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a bit about your company, Airboat Afrika. How did that come to be?
Yeah. My previous company, so I have to do a little rewind, was
Mm-hmm.
Train Cruises. We bought all train coaches from around Africa and refurbed them. We put in hotel rooms, a bar, restaurant, kitchen, everything you need for a
Mm-hmm.
cruise. Because Big George didn't like flying and we don't have enough water really to do a cruise on a ship, like they do on the Mississippi or the Danube or something.
Mm-hmm.
So we put the whole idea on wheels and made trains. And the effect of it was that people had to follow the train tracks. They couldn't fly from one hotspot to the next and then say, oh, we've been to Cape Town and we saw the Kruger Park. They actually witnessed what real life is like in between. And I liked that. So the tourist had to
Mm-hmm.
become a bit of a traveler, uh,
Mm-hmm.
quite a change. And I liked that idea. So I went back to the whole cruising idea. And I thought, well, how do you deal with rivers that have big differences between wet and dry seasons and sandbanks and all kinds of things?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, what would a proper redneck do? You would get an airboat because there you don't have to worry about it. And that's how the idea was born. Let's try airboats in Africa. And so I went to Florida and got one.
Just go do it, right? So airboats are interesting. I did not realize that they could travel on both water and land, and they can
Mhm.
go up to 100 kilometers an hour on water and 70 kilometers an hour on land. How does this work?
Well, let's put it this way. Imagine a sled. You're from Canada. So
Yes.
it's flat and it slides. An airboat is the basic idea, very simple physics. You put a lot of power and then it slides. We have no moving parts below the waterline. So we're not too worried of what's below us. And what is the hull of a boat is then protected with about 10 mil of high density polymer coating. So it protects you against abrasions and rocks and impacts and things like that. It means you can now slide over sandbanks. You hardly need to slow down. That much water over the beach is fine. I can do 70 Ks and I'm not really in the water. Just take out the friction. Anything but grass vegetation is brilliant. Another thing is because we don't have a propeller in the water, the danger to wildlife is minimal. We would really have to aim for them and hit them, which is not something we do. But you hear a lot in Florida about manatees getting injured by boats and things. Well, we don't do that, you know. So we just slide with a lot of power, and snow and ice is even better, but we don't have any of that.
No, but that's okay. You're okay without the snow and the ice. So how do you use the airboats to explore Africa's hidden treasures?
Well, many of our rivers are lovely and passable on the river mouth areas, which tend to be quite flat and sandy and everything. But then it gets hectic. As I mentioned, there are big differences between dry and rainy seasons. And sandbanks are alive. They move around in a different spot all the time. So it allows us to pretty much go further than anybody else could and access a lot of places where there's basically no infrastructure, no roads, places that would not be accessible with any kind of wheeled vehicle, where you could only get by air. But we can still go. And where my original idea was really tourism based, we end up doing a lot of support for game conservation, anti-poaching, that kind of thing in areas difficult to access. It then became paired with the flood relief, disaster management, where we support World Food Program, Doctors Without Borders and things, because we can move where nobody else can. And in areas where there are tourism activities, it then provides the possibility to have ongoing activities year round. And it provides income to local communities because now people can do something when they go there. So they go there all times of the year. But normally they would have to stay away for this other problem, you know?
Right. So you'd probably be able to access different local communities outside of the normal tourism realm then.
Yeah, I mean, depending on where we operate, we have relationships with some of the communities that are directly around us. And either we employ staff from there or we train young people to come in and, you know, learn how to pilot boats or be a mechanic or, you know, whatever the various jobs may be. And also just interact and allow people a glimpse into real life, something that's not a tourist village, that's quite far away from towns, just see how people live. What does their daily life look like? What do they eat? You know, basic questions like that. But you know, even if you live in a round hut, a rondavo, you still have a solar panel and you have a portable phone. You know, this is how things are today, and everybody has online banking. That's the way it is.
Yeah, I love the community tourism aspect of it. I'm a big proponent for community tourism and getting into communities more off the beaten path, so to say. So yeah.
Yeah,
Very
I
good.
think that's where the interest is, you know, because that's real life. And I mean, we see the differences between an urban, a regional, and a really countryside environment. And to many people, it's an eye opener how you can live a decent life with very simple means. And to many people, that's really unimaginable from far away until you've seen it. How do you live without running water or electricity, you know? Not an easy one. It just, you have to work a lot more.
Yeah. And generally those people still are happy. You know, they're happy with what they have. They're grateful for what they have.
Yeah, of course. And when they go to town, I find it incredibly stressful. When I'm away for a longer period, and then I come back to Johannesburg, it takes me about a week at least to land mentally, and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's noisy, too many people and too much of everything. And I just need to readjust even to my own house. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Even here in Canada, like that, when we first started talking here this morning, you'd mentioned how my Easter was, and I said I'd went back home to the farm I grew up and to disconnect and get off internet, get off the computer. I didn't open my computer for a week. And out on the farm, it's quiet. You hear the birds, you can hear a train that's 10 kilometers away over the hillside. And now I'm back in Calgary and there's the noise and the sirens and I have to adjust all over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also doing some work on a farm that's about half an hour's drive from here, but it's out of town. It's about 1,000 hectares. We've got plenty of game, giraffe, zebra, eland, antelope, and all kinds of
Oh,
things.
wow.
And so when you spend the weekend out there and then you come back, you're already unfazed. It's like the moment traffic picks up, you want to turn around and go back. I want to deal with this. No, I'm not ready.
I completely relate to that. Completely relate to that. We just had a comment about the airboats. Very cool way to get around in such wild terrain.
Often enough, the only way. Your only other option really is a helicopter, but that costs a fortune, is difficult to maintain. And one of the big advantages is when helicopters stop, they drop. When we stop, we float. And if it's really bad, then we go fishing, So it's just more of the same. Yeah.
And you mentioned the price. Of course, helicopters we know are expensive. What is the price of an airboat tour like? Like what?
Okay, what you find varies wildly, let's say, across the states. The way we have developed them now for Africa, with a lot of redundancy and backup, because you really don't want to be stuck in the swamp. Mosquitoes are no fun and hippos are not friendly. So we have inbuilt buoyancy. That means even if you have a catastrophe and you take on water, it's still going to float. And all these little things, they make your life a little bit longer. It's nice. So you're looking at a price tag starting from around about $100,000. Now I'm talking something the size of a 4x4, and then it gets big to like a truck. We have some which carry easy 30 tons of cargo. And those are monsters. You really want to get out of the way. But for industrial projects, that's what's needed. Yeah?
So that's the cost of an airboat would be generally like $100K.
Yeah, around about $100,000. Okay. So it's not a cheapie, but in the absence of actual alternatives, either that or nothing. Yeah.
Now, do you do guided tours then as well?
Yeah, we have some guided tour activities that we do, where we really share about environment, history, the geology, the wildlife, sort of the background of everything that's around. And we do that in English, German, or French. So yeah, that's also part of it. Yeah.
Fun.
And we have one activity in West Africa. Those are multiple day tours. So they go from one village to another, sleep over in schools, in mosques, wherever you actually can. And it's it's a tour up the river. And it's one of the most amazing experiences to witness life on the river, because people live there all their life. They're shipping up and down, have these big barges, which are like a floating village. On the one corner, there's people. On the other corner, there's goats and chickens and stuff, all on the same barge. And this is unimaginable to people from, the Northern Hemisphere. That's how people live. So, and that's what we see. We talk and we spend a couple of hours with them and then we move on.
Yeah. Excellent.
That's quite an experience.
Yeah. The river is life in Africa, isn't it?
Oh yeah. It's everything. It's like a big highway in America, all your food outlets, everything's on the highway. This is what a river is, because there are no roads. This is the only passage there is. The rest, don't try.
No. So I do have another question. How many How many people can go in a group tour if you do a group tour? Do you have a minimum or a maximum?
No, minimum would be 2, really. And a maximum, depending on where and the size of the equipment we have, would be between 6 and 8.
Okay, so that's a nice size. Nice, yeah.
Yeah, it remains manageable and doesn't get crowded. And more than that wouldn't really make sense either, not for this type of experience. Yeah.
Oh, fun. Well, this has been interesting for me. It's been learning about the airboats, and I'm familiar with them from, like you said, Florida and the Everglades and that type of thing where you went and got yours. But if people want to find out more about you, Chris, and Airboat Afrika, where's the best place to find you?
Well, have a look online, Airboat Afrika with a K,
Mhm.
Africa with a K, that's the German part, .com. And we're on Twitter, and we have a YouTube channel, and we're on Instagram. And so you can see some of the crazy things that we're doing out there. Yeah, that's the easy part. And otherwise, just get in touch.
Excellent. I like how you mentioned that the Africa, the K, because I wondered that where the K came from, and now I understand from the German, because in Germany, Canada is spelt with a K.
I couldn't resist. I had to do something.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Chris, and I'm glad we got your power outage figured out and we were able to meet. It's been a pleasure.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. All right. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Evening.
Thanks. Exactly. Cheers.
Cheers. Prost.